Still at Stalingrad, still playing the OCS, still trying to find out what happens with this German relief attempt to Stalingrad, Operation Wintergewitter. The Russians have just counterattacked in the centre here, and it was fairly lacklustre. In fact, I think the Russians got surprised in all 3 or 4 of the combats that they tried. They just had some terrible dice, but it happens, especially when you're up against these tough German units with ARs of 4 and 5, like these guys in here. I never really explain rules, but for anyone that doesn't know this system at all, if you take this, say, German Panzer Unit 1201 there, 646 armour, 23rd Panzer Unit, and this, there, the 6 is its combat strength, the 4 and the 6 in the yellow box is 6 tracked movement, but the little 4 in between those 2 6s is something called the action rating, and whenever you go into combat you compare your action rating with the enemy, and then you roll 2 dice and modify it by the difference. So if yours is higher you get a plus, and if yours is lower you get a minus. And high results give you surprise, and low results mean you are surprised, and then you shift your odds on the combat table by you roll a dice and you move that many columns either in your favour if you get surprise or against you if you are surprised. So a lot of the time there isn't surprise and the combat odds stay as they are, but surprise can shift you up to 6 columns, and that's huge. So what is an overwhelming 7 or 8 to 1 attack can suddenly be evens and a horrible retreat with losses and all kinds of stuff like that. And similarly, what looks like a forlorn hope of an attack can suddenly turn into a brilliantly executed 6 to 1, 7 to 1 demolition job. So it does provide that swinginess that combat, especially at this scale, really needs. It can't just be a predictable grind. So the Russians got surprised all the way along the line, just got outmanoeuvred, outthought, outfought, but they still, as you can see from the gaps in the German line down here, still caused casualties just through weight of numbers, even though they were often having to retreat to satisfy their combat results. If you're having to retreat but the enemy's taking losses, then for the Russians that's fine. The other thing is that the Russians have just won the initiative, so they've got a second chance at it now. With all these open spaces now to move into, this could get really ugly, and I think I'm fairly sure that this is turn 4, that the Russians are going to stop any hope of a German breakthrough towards Stalingrad. You can see that the Russians have just built a line of infantry across there with a big armour, big armoured 6th Mechanised Corps at its base, and so even if this sort of 17th Panzer, 6th Panzer spearhead did get anywhere up towards Stalingrad, this lot is waiting to A, engage it, and B, swing round behind it and cut any attempt to keep it in supply. It's just not happening here for the Germans. I don't really know whether I had to do something very specific on turn 1 with them to make it even viable, but I can't see a way that they're going to get anywhere close to Stalingrad. They're not even going to be engaging this perimeter line in any way, shape or form. They're just being swamped by weight of numbers, and they just don't have the capacity to hold supply lines open, nor do they have the manpower to take losses You know, it's all good stuff, but every loss is a killer for them, whereas the Russians have so much material and manpower here that they can shrug off you know, losing a tank brigade, losing an infantry division. You know, they've got more coming all the time. So something of a lesson in the Eastern Front there, I suppose. There it is. So I've nattered for long enough about this. Let's get on and give these Russians another crack at the Germans and see if we can break up this attack. And if it all falls apart for the Germans, I'm going to call it. I'm not going to play it out to the bitter end. Russian part of the turn done, and this has become completely untenable for the Germans. You can see they are sort of broken up now into little pockets. You've got these Romanian force here. They've just lost a unit. You've got a sort of pocket of a bit of armour and some artillery and headquarters and stuff in there. There's a bunch of stragglers and some trucks over here, and then the main German thrust up here, which is now completely surrounded and is going to have to try and fight its way out of there on low ammo and internal stocks, because the trucks their own trucks haven't kept up with them. That was a mistake on my part, but still, even if they could, you know, even if they could summon supply out of trucks to fight their way through this, I mean, they can't fight forward because that's just going to leave them the same problem again. And if they go backwards, they're just another turn away from getting anywhere towards completing their objective. I mean, it's all gone pretty badly wrong here. I mean, yeah, this stuff can't even move. I mean, it can try and fight, but it can't. I don't think you can fuel from internal stocks. I think you can fight with them, or maybe you can fuel with them. Anyway, they haven't got them, so and they haven't got any supply on trucks, so that's it, I think, for the Germans. I might try and play out their turn to see if there's any way out of this encirclement in here, but even if there is, it isn't going forward, and they just haven't got the units available that they need to maintain any sort of credible supply net. There's too many Russians that can just, too much Russian armour, too much Russian mech that can just slide into the gaps and break up any attempt to supply. So this version of this attempt to get through just hasn't worked at all. I may have revisit this scenario at some point, but it's been a real good exercise. Very interesting to look at. I had doubts about the German, you know, whether this was a viable task, just looking at the forces and at setup and how much distance the Germans had to cover and how much they had to protect while fighting their way through. I didn't see it as remotely possible when I set it up, and it's turned out to be the case. But it's a very good exercise to try, and it's very interesting to watch it happen. And you know, no one ever says that historical situations are balanced. You know, if you're given a situation like this, you do the best you can, and you watch it unfold, and you go, oh, yeah, no wonder the relief force didn't make it. So that, the way I've played it, those 3 Panzer divisions would have been completely annihilated. I don't think that's what happened historically. I think they realised they weren't getting anywhere and pulled back, but yeah, I've pushed forward just a bit too far here and managed to get them pretty much destroyed. Fantastic stuff. I don't think I'm going to push on with this much further because I don't really see any point. Like I say, I may play out this German turn to see how it goes, but certainly as far as a contest in terms of trying to get supply into Stalingrad, this is over. There's no way that that's happening in a turn or two. Absolutely no chance whatsoever. So there it is. Wintergewitter. Yes, Russian victory.